Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Both my grandparents were born and grew up in rural Mexico. They had a ton of spooky stories and experiences. This took place around 1930 to 1940. Grandpa lives on a farm outside the main village. He is around 12 by this time. It was night around 8 to 9 p.m. No electricity, only candles and oil lamps, so it was dark. The whole family is inside waiting for dinner. For no apparent reason, Grandpa started to feel off. He describes it as feeling worried. The sensation increased. The environment felt heavy. Not only that, but he saw how the whole family felt similarly. His sisters played quietly instead of being loud. His mother looked off as well as father. The sensation increased up to the point there was no other sound. No crickets or wind blowing. Suddenly there is someone knocking the door. This is weird, as my grandpa explained to me. No one used to knock doors in his village if they knew you. They would whistle or shout out your name, and as this is a small village, everyone knew each other. Also, dogs are not barking or making any noise. They had around 5 dogs to protect the property. Great-grandpa checks from the window and opens the door. Grandpa tries to peek and hear. There is a girl early 20s with a little boy around 8. Grandpa recalls the conversation was about the girl and little boy being lost and needing help. Great-grandpa questioned who they were, where they were from, etc. Great-grandpa is acting weird, taking too long to reply to the conversation. Great-grandma is puzzled by this and peeks from the window, screams and tries to pull great-grandpa inside. Great-grandpa is big, and she cannot move him. He seems to be in a trance. Great-grandma slaps him. Great-grandpa is tough, punching Mexican macho men. Great-grandpa snaps out of its trance and gets inside. Kids are now scared of grandpa, thinking he will punch everyone. But both my great-grandpa and grandma are terrified. They start praying and ask kids to do the same. The girl outside says nothing and they can hear her walking away. Great-grandpa is in shock. Minutes later they have dinner in complete silence and go to sleep. Grandpa recalls seeing terror in both their parents. Great-grandpa was a tough man, had fought the Mexican Revolution and enjoyed killing, shooting bandits that had tried to raid his property. This terrified grandpa. He had never seen his dad like that. Next day, grandpa does not dare ask his parents what happened. Grandpa is sent downtown for supplies. There are people already talking about the same stuff. Grandpa asks around and for more details, and apparently all agree the same but with different variations. The girl with the little boy starts knocking doors asking for help. They all report a weird sensation before and during the encounter. Some people state they had no eyes. Others say they were floating or that they even had horns and shit like that. Grandpa does not remember those details as it was dark when he peeked, but it makes sense why their parents were terrified. Grandpa is scared and goes to great-grandpa to tell everything he heard. Great-grandpa is mad and tells grandpa not to talk about it. Talking about the paranormal only strengthens them and calls them. Couple days later, everything is normal. However, there are missing folks from the village. A family of 6. An elder couple and some homeless guys have not been seen since that night. The houses were empty with rotten food still on the dishes. They look and ask around for them in other villages, but there is no trace of missing people. My grandma was around 3 when that happened, so she doesn't remember it, but their parents and family told her about that night. It is still remembered among people in the village, and they all believe it was some sort of devil. Over time, the version of the incident changes depending on who you ask, but it is still weird how several inhabitants experience something similar. Another story from my grandpa. My grandpa. Family uses oil lamps during the nights. Grandpa is told to go downtown to get more oil for the night. Grandpa forgets about it and keeps messing around. It is getting dark and parents are pissed he didn't go. He is told to go anywhere else. The main village is around 1 hour away and there is only a dirt road. Grandpa goes in plain dark. He is freaked out because of all of the spooks people talk about. He is not even halfway when he hears movement in the bushes. Grandpa was spooked already, so he just ran away towards the village. When got tired, he looked back and could not see anything. He keeps looking back from time to time. Sees something black on the dirt road just where he was seconds ago. I think it is a shadow from one of the trees. Keeps walking fast because he is still spooked. turns back, it is there again. It seemed to have moved. Grandpa runs again and reaches a slope, goes past it and looks back. It is not there. Grandpa relaxes and keeps walking. Looks back at the slope where trees do not block the moonlight, and it is there again. It was on the slope. Grandpa describes it as just a black mass blob. Not particularly big, but big enough to be a threat. Now he saw the blob moving fast towards him. Grandpa kept running and looking back for a while. There was always this thing following him, but never seemed able to get him. Grandpa was scared nonetheless and kept running. He got to the village. It was illuminated and saw people, so he relaxed. Went to the general store to get the oil on a canister he had. Now he had to go back. There was no other road to go home. He had to go walk the same road again or go through the woods and bushes. Thinks for a while and decides to check the dirt road first. Go through it slowly. The thing is nowhere to be seen. Keep walking while looking back each couple of steps. Looks back and out of nowhere the blob is at him again. This time it is closer and manages to get a better look at it. The only detail he could see before GTFO was that it had heavy thick hair. And it was using it to displace or crawl like thousands of extremities, if that makes sense. Grandpa describes it as similar to Pick related. Only it didn't have the elongated shape of a worm. It was more rounded like, and the hair, extremities were not pointy. Grandad tries to run as fast as he can but forgets he is carrying the canister. If he spills the oil, he will be in a lot of trouble. Goes as fast as he can without spilling the oil. The blob is getting closer as he cannot run now. He can hear the sound of thousands of thick hairs moving through the dirt. He also remembers a heavy stench that made him gag and almost puke. Grandad could not resist all those sensations at the same time. Placed the canister next to a tree and ran all the way home. When he got home he puked. Grandparents were pissed because of the oil, but were also concerned because of the state Grandpa was in. Decide to go through the night without oil and check the next day. Next day Grandad goes to the dirt road with his dad. Sure, the oil was in the place Grandpa left it. And there are strange markings on the road. Great-granddad believes Grandpa because why would he leave the oil there knowing that getting home with it was a guaranteed beat up? Both my grandparents moved out to the city around the 60s. Fast forward to the 80s. My mom is visiting family in the same village. There is now electricity. Mom and some aunts go to church. Pass next to a corn crop field. When they go back from church they see something black on the road. They thought it was a pile of trash or some black bags someone left there. They got close to it. The thing seemed to notice them and crawled towards the crop field. They could not get a good look at it, but it seems to match what Grandpa saw. A story from the same village about my great-great-grandma I was told. She was born around 1900. Seen and lived through a lot of shit. Parents and siblings killed or kidnapped because of war and internal conflict. Lost sons and daughters as well. There were for sure more fucked up shit she lived, but my family would not tell me or even knows. Because of that she was really tough and hardened by life, yet sweet and kind. She was around 60 when her youngest kid got married. She moved out of the house she was living in so the new couple can move there. She asked the rest of her kids to build a little house for her. In a couple months they built a small house near some crop fields as she requested. She lived there for several years until she was near her. Everyone disliked her living there because it was secluded and she was all on her own. She enjoyed it nonetheless. She was very religious and was never afraid of the spooks despite experiencing some shit. One night at around 4 p.m. she arrives at the house of one of his sons. She was terrified, pale and shaking of fear. Could not even talk about it. Next day she was able to speak and told everyone she was never returning to the small house she loved so much. Didn't want to tell what happened, she just said she saw something paranormal or spooky. Never talk about it again. She died never telling anyone some years later. The whole family wonders what could she have seen to be that spooked.
Perhaps it isn't spooky for everyone, but this is something that I witnessed in my teen years. I was 16 years old. Went hunting somewhere in the northeast of Mexico. Went with an uncle and cousin, but they're irrelevant. The plan was to stay there hunting for a day and a half and return home. We were hunting together, but with no luck, a few rabbits but not anything bigger in sight. Uncle decides it'll be good to split in order to cover more area and maybe this way spot something good. Okay, I guess. I went to a thick part of the forest and climbed a tree to have a better view of the area. I fell asleep. Woke up freezing in the middle of the night. Shit. I was about to get down and return to the camp, and then I heard something. A chain rustling sound not too far from where I was, and some voices. Decided to stay on the tree and try to look for the source of the sound. Catched a glimpse of light from what appeared to be a torch about 100 to 120 meters away from me. WTF, the forest wasn't a camping area, and that part isn't very known. Climb down real slow and quiet to get closer to the light. As I get closer, I start listening to what can only be some kind of chanting in Spanish. Finally got really close. I was scared shitless but wanted to see. About 10 to 15 people in a circle, white loose clothing. They were not robes, no shoes, all of them were carrying machetes and other blunt weapons. Single small torch in the middle of the circle. Then I hear the chain rustling again. On the ground beside the torch there was this young woman, who looked about 20, strapped to the ground somehow. Looked bruised and hurt, blood coming from her nose. What shocked me most was how broken she looked, hopeless, hollow, no signs of life even though she was breathing. What I assume was an older woman started cleaning her up while others chanted. The chanting was not really loud, so I couldn't hear most of it. I heard Abre la Puerta, which means open the door, a few times. The rest was unintelligible. Then it hit me like a bucket of cold water. I wasn't supposed to be there. I knew what that looked like, but there's nothing I could do. Started coming back really slow, laying low, trying to not make a single sound. About 50 meters from them I couldn't stand it. Turned around and aimed my rifle at the general direction of the light from the torch. I fire my rifle. Heard nothing but absolute silence after the shot. This is bad. Started running like hell back to the camp, which was pretty far away. Never turned back, never looked back. Finally arrived to the camp. Uncle asks me where the fuck I was. Tell him everything. We need to leave right now. Cousin asked him why, but he never answered, just told us to shut the fuck up about it and never tell anyone about this. Okay then. Packed everything quickly and left. It was about 3 to 4 a.m. when we left. My uncle drove like we were being chased, and perhaps we never saw anything in the local news. With all the girls disappearing in this country, it's hard to track things like this. It haunts me to this day and I feel so guilty about it.
I'm Mexican, and to my understanding most of the episodes from this program had a somewhat of a real-life background. Also, to me, one of the most overlooked things going on in Mexico right now and from many years ago is the fact that there is a witch capital city. This city name is Catemaco in the province of Veracruz, close to where the Spaniards arrived with Columbus and where a lot of slave trade took place. Supposedly a lot of businessmen, opticians, athletes, and of course drug lords visit regularly in a small city that does not account for more than 30,000 people. Another thing that happened 1 or 2 years ago was the disappearance of a small girl in Mexico City. Nothing unheard of in a city of 20 million people. But this time the mother got a glance of the kidnapper, which was a woman. Anyway, there was a huge mobilization in social media to locate the girl. The pressure on the police and government was huge, so this time they actually gave a shit and started to look for the girl. Eventually she was found the next night, but not by the police but the neighbors of the kidnappers, who turned out to be a couple. A mob gathered and a lot of people were live filming the capture with their phones. What I remember is that the kidnappers had kidnapped the girl in order to sell her to some wealthy buyers, and that it wasn't the first time. Police had to stop the mob from killing the kidnappers. The next day the police gave a press interview in which they stated the kidnappers planned to kill the girl but were stopped. End of story, and everyone lived happily ever after. No need to investigate further into those wealthy buyers.
When I was 13 years old, I was visiting my grandparents for the first time. They live in Mexico and we grew up poor, so couldn't afford to visit them often. The trip was cool. Basically play in the mountains all day, eat delicious Mexican food, etc. But there's one weird thing. I didn't remember it for a long time. Almost every night I'd wake up for no reason. I'd lie there with my eyes open, not scared, but feeling very alert. Then I'd hear a sound. The only way to describe it is kind of like the sound of a creaky door opening. Very similar, but not exactly. The sound came from the wall right next to my bed. Then I'd hear footsteps walking through the house. Very heavy, very slow. Never felt afraid. But I couldn't sleep till they were gone. I'd lie there until I heard the same noise as before. Creak. The whole thing usually lasted an hour. Anyway, for some reason I guess I never brought it up. My memories of it aren't very good, so maybe at the time I thought it was a dream, I don't know. Anyway, the trip ends and we return home. Years later, we went back to visit our grandparents. I'm 19 at this point. One day I'm helping my grandma make tortillas. Just me and her. Suddenly I remembered my dream. Hadn't thought about it in years. Tell grandma about it. Her face lights up. She said it's not a dream. She hears it too, footsteps and everything. She brought it up to my grandpa once, back when they were both young. He thought she was just crazy. Grandma never brought it up again. I ask her if she knows what it is. She says no. Then she tells me not to mention it to anyone. She sounds sad.
Nobody will believe you anyway.
All right, guys, I'm currently on my way to Mexico. Now there's a place that my father has land where he plants crops. Probably over 500 acres in between two mountain ranges. So it's literally in the middle of nowhere. But something weird happened to my uncle while he was there taking care of equipment. My uncle is just a traditional ranch native, that being said. My dad also spent a lot making a pump well from an underground river that's located in between the ranges. My uncle is staying there by himself for a few days and nights. His story goes, my uncle get woken up in the middle of the night, gets up and walks to the gate that overlooks the whole land, sees someone standing by my dad's well, claims this person has a very strong thin light, almost like a laser pointing at the well. Out of nowhere it turns and faces towards him. Described it as if it had a mask, but it was protruding like a muzzle for a dog. Says it shines the light on him. Wakes up the next day in bed shaking shit scared. Leaves that same day and tells his wife. They do a tradition where they cleanse him from bad spirits. I've always been skeptical behind this story, like I don't see why someone like him would make a story up like that. Plus the description matches a few encounters if I could remember, and he doesn't know about extraterrestrials and their connection with water, so it adds some authenticity to his story. Either way, I'm going to try to contact something while I'm there in the middle of the night. Hopefully this thread is up when I get the chance to.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.